Madness Combat, our favorite web series set in Nevada, where the main character, Hank J. Wibbleton, commits massacres to complete his only goal in life, which is killing his enemies. The series has 15 episodes, with the episodes originating from Newgrounds, made by Matt Jolly, or commonly referred to as his online alias, Crinkles. I'm going to make a tier list on every Madness Combat media that is actually relevant. So, without a further ado, let's go. Madness Combat 1, the first installment of the Madness Combat series. It's okay. The animation begins with Hank standing around a tree, and a man is playing the song Chicken Dance on his boombox. Hank doesn't like this, so he beats the boombox man to death, and everyone else in the background, and Jesus, or Jeebus. Jeebus is an absolute beta in this episode. He can create shields, he can resurrect people into zombies, but for some reason 5 seconds later, he lets his guard down and he gets killed by like 5 bullets. And there's just not enough blood and gore. C tier. Madness Combat 2, the sheriff of the town is now Hank's target for unknown reasons. There is more action and more things going on screen. But guess what? Jeebus is alive and stalks him around the building where Hank is committing a killing spree. At the very end, Jeebus shoots him in the back of the head when he's right about to kill the sheriff and fails. Not gonna lie, I feel still good episode, so B tier. Madness Combat 3, Avenger was really good. Hank rose up from the death once again and sets out to kill the sheriff. The sheriff enables the improbability drive. The improbability drive is a device that bends and breaks the confinements of reality, causing all sorts of mayhem and confusion. This makes the enemies in the Madness Combat universe more aggressive. Avenger had one of the best soundtracks out of the other episodes. Avenger is also the episode where Tricky had his iconic weapon, the stop sign, he ripped out of his chest right after Hank stabbed him with it. At the end, Hank does successfully kill the sheriff and then dies. A tier. Madness Combat APOTHEOSIS. Hank is back at Club M, mainly to hunt down Tricky. The episode begins with an intro showing Hank being bandaged after being shot by Jesus. At the end of Madness Combat 2 Redeemer, no regret. Then again being bandaged after being impaled by Jesus' sword. At the end of Madness Combat 3 Avenger, no remorse. Then Tricky puts on his iron mask, no reason, only madness. Which confirms that Hank is just a psychopath that is bored. Jesus was about to kill Hank. Hank killed both himself and Jesus via suicide bomb, but Tricky was left unfazed. That is cool. B tier. Madness Combat Depredation. Hank is back from the dead. While fighting Jeebus, he falls off a ledge. Hank lands and kills a bunch of agents. A street sign pops up out of the ground, accompanied with the text, "Warning, danger." Tricky shows up from the ground, but is quickly shot down by Hank. The improbability drive was pressed again. Tricky's powers increased of incredible speed combined with superhuman strength and reflexes. Tricky rips Hank's head and throws it on the floor. The soundtrack of this episode was also good, and moral of the story, violence is funny. A tier. Madness Combat 5.5. Madness Combat 0.5 episodes are side episodes to the main Madness Combat series. Madness Combat 5.5 introduced the characters Deimos and Sanford. They were both the grunts in the previous episode who gave Hank the weapon. The characters go through the episode slaying agents. Sanford is really good with swords and sharp objects. I think he's British, but I like the episode. I will give it a B tier. Madness Combat Antipathy. Hank wakes up with his jaw all messed up because in Depredation, Tricky ripped his head off and slammed it on the ground. The combat in this episode is faster, and Hank's reflexes are inhumane to show that Hank is getting angrier and angrier. I think Hank has aimbot on. This is good to capture the average internet viewer's non-existent attention span. At the end of the episode, Hank runs up to Tricky. When he had his guard down, he impales an axe into Tricky's head and shoots him multiple times to the torso. Tricky is then dropped off the cliff. However, Tricky doesn't die. A tier. Madness Combat 6.5. This episode also had a good soundtrack. The same thing happened in the last 0.5 episode, except for Sanford and Deimos giving themselves a more unique and memorable appearance. Also, Jesus quit. B tier. Madness Combat Consternation. It's probably the best episode. Tricky is chasing after Hank the entire episode. So is another enemy, the mag agent Torture. While watching, you're thinking, how was Hank gonna get out of this? I don't know. But Jesus kills him at the end of the episode. S tier. Madness Combat 7.5 is just like the other episode. Sanford and Deimos are blazing through this building and spraying everyone in the room. Towards the end of the episode, we learn that Hank is dead. B tier. Madness Combat Indignation is the first episode where Jeebus is the protagonist. This is a really good episode. It shows how determined a man is to go after an organization he was once a part of, ripping the lives out of the pathetic minions he once helped to get to the leader of the system. S tier. Madness Combat 9 Aggregation. Sanford and Deimos revive Hank, and Hank is turned into this giant unit with a deformed arm. This deformed arm basically made Hank OP. Sanford and Hank go after the Auditor to end the organization. Also, Deimos dies. A tier. Madness Combat 9.5. 9.5 takes place after the events of Madness Combat 7.5, when Hank dies. Hank falls into the other place. The other place is an afterlife in the Madness Combat universe. The episode ends off a cliffhanger with a retainer grabbing Hank off the ground, preparing to kill him. The animation is very fluid and smooth. After all, it is the most recent animations out of all the animations in the series. A tier. Madness Combat Aborigation. The episode takes place where Madness Combat Aggregation left off. Hank and Sanford engage the Auditor. They both kill the Auditor, and the Auditor explodes into a cloud of smoke. A tier. Madness Combat Expurgation is an episode filled with action, and more action. Tricky comes back as a skeleton. He says, "Cannot kill clown." Shortly after, he gets killed. And it's not Tricky, it's the Auditor. So that is it for the episodes. Time for the characters. Hank J. Wibbleton. Hank has murdered hundreds and hundreds of people. In the series, his motives are unclear. He does the same thing over and over again just to meet the same fate most of the time. It is so obvious. He enjoys and is used to his lifestyle of complete brutality. In the first episode, he casually beats dozens of people to death because he was annoyed with someone with a boombox. At the end of the episode, he would admit that he enjoyed doing it. Hank is based. Based is a slang term that originally meant to be addicted to crack, but was reclaimed by the rapper Lil B for being yourself and not caring what others think of you. Not being afraid to do what you want to do. To carry yourself with swagger. S tier. Sanford. Sanford is more serious than the other characters. Like Hank, he just goes straight for action. B tier. Deimos. Deimos doesn't really seem to care like Sanford and Hank do about this job. He takes the chance to smoke a cigarette whenever he can, and he taunts his enemies before he kills them. Now, this is the attitude I could get behind. A tier. Sheriff. The sheriff is a complete pussy. The sheriff runs away and lets his minions and Jeebus deal with Hank instead of fighting him himself. D tier. Jeebus. Jeebus doesn't really like the violence going on in Nevada. He tries stopping it by doing the exact thing that he is against and failing miserably to do so. Jeebus is also a really intimidating character. B tier. Tricky. Tricky is a psychotic killing machine. He likes to toy with Hank by murdering him and reviving him multiple times in the series. In Madness Combat Antipathy, he armed Hank with a weapon and spawned an entire building filled with agents. After he got through the building and killed Tricky, Tricky came back to life in another form. Now, this is what I call tomfoolery. A tier. Grunts. They are the most common enemies in Madness Combat, and they're the most simplest looking character, with only a gray body and no unique clothing. These little pieces of shit are so weak and worthless. Their fighting abilities are non-existent, but they decide to go against and throw themselves at Hank. They go down after 2 hits. They have no other skills other than being used as background footage and turn into zombies as weapons. But they're really cute and small. If I saw a grunt in real life, I will keep it as a pet. I will give it wholesome tier. There is an unofficial Madness Combat live action movie set in an alternate universe with a completely different backstory of Hank than we see in the Madness Combat series. Hank is walking home and meets the sheriff in his house, holding his wife and son hostage. Apparently, Hank has not paid the sheriff his money back. The sheriff shoots 2 of his family members right in front of him. Hank tries rushing over to the sheriff, but gets knocked down and knocked down again and again. Then the sheriff proceeds to burn Hank alive. Some mysterious guy helps Hank. I don't know how the hell this guy found Hank. This guy gives Hank a gun and gives him the location of the sheriff. For some reason, Hank shoots the guy that helps him and steals his glasses. I'm guessing because Hank has glasses in the main series, Hank will need to get those glasses somehow. Now Hank is officially out on his adventure to get his revenge on the sheriff. But of course he needs to look at the pictures of him and his wife, and he looks at a picture of him in a cowboy hat. Cosplay. Hank walks into the building where the sheriff is supposedly hiding in. We get this dumbass who just blows off his bullets at the wall when Hank did not peek like once, and Hank just one-shots him. After Hank is done clearing the house riddled with enemies, he finds out that the sheriff is not there, but one of the enemies gave him the location of the sheriff. So Hank runs through the fields with Keemstar Drama Alert intro music playing in the background. He sees Jeebus with a sniper, and Jeebus uses his spidey senses and teleports to him. Hank still beats his ass though. Right after that, Hank and the sheriff get into a gunfight where they all miss their shots. Can one of you guys just install aimbot or some shit and get it over with? When Hank thinks he has the sheriff cornered, at gunpoint, the movie makes a reference to Madness Combat 2. Jeebus is actually right behind him at gunpoint too, but Jeebus goes down pretty easily. The sheriff shoots Hank several times, but I guess Hank's adrenaline rush and his lust for revenge is way too high because the bullets just phase right through him, and Hank strangles the sheriff to death. Hank would later die of his gunshot wounds and probably join his family in the afterlife too, or something like that. I don't know how dying works. And like that is the end of the movie. S tier. I enjoyed the movie. I thought it was pretty good for a team of small people, it looks like. It's not the best, but it clearly looks like there was passion put into it. I also like the alternate storyline, where Hank is an actual person with an actual life and family. Dream stands and most users cannot relate to this. Instead of being some psychotic mass murderer because some guy was playing a song on a boombox that he didn't like. So this is the end of this tier list. I know, best tier list. Goodbye.
Heaven's close, but I cannot reach it. Collarbone so bruised and bare bleeding. Stained glass heart keeps breaking in.